Well, for a deeper look into startups and trends in the medical technology market, I spoke to Greg Crist. He's the Executive Vice President for Public Affairs for the Advanced Medical Technology Association. And I started off by asking him how startups can enter a space that's dominated by big companies.
The Advanced Medical Technology Association is the world's leading trade association. We actually have an entire division dedicated to those small companies. 70% of all manufacturers in the United States are small companies, the size of 1, 5, 10 individuals. When you think about innovation, as in this case of Emma and her device, that's usually where it begins. The blueprint begins in their own individual minds, and then they can come to these companies and say, hey, how do we collaborate? And as I understand, I think that's how it took place there. That's an important part of the ecosystem, because anyone will tell you, yes, if you can serve one individual, a family, or even a community, that's great. But if it truly is life-changing, how can we take that around the world? So companies can help you not only produce that on such a scale, but then also remember we're dealing with healthcare.
Right.
So an individual's human condition, and you want to make sure that you don't mess that up, right? So these larger companies, or even the smaller or the mid-sized companies, can pay attention to the standards that's set by the regulatory bodies and others to ensure that whether it's one device or that device is created 1,000 times, that it adheres to the rigors and the standards that are set by the governments.
Now, obviously, this is a huge market, medtech, by some estimates about $400 billion. So are there particular aspects that people are drawn to when it comes to investment?
I tell you a lot. At the beginning of this decade, what we've seen is the era of consumer health, right? So what you've seen, Rachelle, in a lot of the technologies, has been a drive to digital health, consumer health. How can the individual be more engaged with their own health care? When you think about the technology of tomorrow, we're looking at micro-laboratories in the human body that can detect disease long before a diagnostic can. So all these marvels really speak to what's around the corner. And that's exciting for the industry, and a lot of entrants want to come into that. Now, that's why the industry will grow beyond $400 billion, but to do so in a responsible way, in a way, again, that adheres to patient safety. That needs to be the top priority.
And as we talk about responsibility and public safety, would you say that the protections are keeping up with the innovations?
It's a constant challenge. It's one that we watch every day, because really you've touched on something. Patient privacy and patient safety are really two sides of the same coin. And now more than ever, because of consumer health, the rise of that in countries such as China, America, India, it does not matter. As long as the patient safety and the patient privacy, they go hand in hand. Now, in order to keep track of that, we need to understand and recognize that all throughout the healthcare system, there are points where the enemy or the opponent or the cyber assailant can insert themselves, right? So whether you walk in and you check in with the attendant, or you visit and have an x-ray or a diagnostic, or you enter an operating room, or even post-surgery, whether you have a medical device implanted, what we've said is that's a collaborative effort that needs to take place, because if it breaks down in one area, it's broken down for that entire patient. And we need to monitor that.
Now, something else we need to monitor, of course, healthcare costs. We know that per capita, the U.S. spends more on healthcare than any other country. How will some of these innovations help at least curb that and give people more access to care?
Because of medical devices, we can now perform surgeries that are minimally invasive, whereas in the past you may have had an open surgery, do a lot of cutting, a lot of incisions. We've been able to, because of minimally invasive, in 2009 alone, $8.9 billion was saved to the federal government, because you're not spending those extra days in a hospital, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $10,000 per day in a hospital.
Right.
You're taking them out of the workforce. That's going to pull from the economy. So we have long said that technology can play a role. It's not a contributor. It's actually one that can take those dollars out of the system and actually yield savings for governments or whoever the payer is.
Now, I did want to take a look at emerging economies, because industry trends show that Asia and China in particular will play a bigger role. And then you also have countries like Rwanda and Ghana experimenting with things like drones to deliver blood and medical supplies. What are the chances that you think perhaps these emerging economies will end up leapfrogging just because they don't have the same sort of access to care that we've seen in the United States and other countries?
So what these emerging economies, what's promising about them is they can be more nimble. and they can adapt to that changing innovation that we're seeing, and they can meet greater needs and demands in the moment. And we're seeing that particularly with, again, consumer and digital health, because they're more software-based. Now, they have privacy concerns we want to be mindful of, but we think that future is teeming with promise.